Today we are talking about one of the surprises of the PTR for Season 3 that we have went to look over when we checked, for example, the more popular played specs in Mythic Plus in the PTR for Season 3 right now. And the reason we say it's a more interesting one is because Brewmaster Monk has not exactly had a time in the spotlight in quite a while. The last time Brewmaster was undoubtedly the more popular tank was in BFA Season 3. So we're talking about some 5 or so years ago is the last time Brewmaster was a meta tank. We have also talked about some of the specs being interesting in the next season, currently doing well in the PTR, like Resto Druid, like Shadow Priest, like Marksmanship Hunter. However, all of these specs have gotten their time in the spotlight much more recently than Brewmaster have. Even just, a couple of seasons ago, basically, it was the day of Shadow Priest. In Dragonflight, the last season of Dragonflight, it was the time of Resto Druid. Meanwhile, for Brewmaster, it has been much longer since they were a top tier level tank. So we are now in the PTR asking ourselves what has happened to this spec to make them, so much more valued right now in the testing. Now, the first thing that has made them very valuable is the addition of the center line, the reworked center line around Nuzao. So this was previously, and by previously we basically mean right now, if we go live essentially in Mythic Plus, nobody cares about this one. Nobody cares about this line right here. You have your base Nuzao, you have the follow-up talent Walk with the Ox, which reduces the cooldown of Nuzao based on gaining Shuffle, and then only gives you 10% more damage, and the last one increases the damage of your next stomp of Nuzao whenever you purify and brew. Now, the changes here are much more positive. For starters, now Nuzao is healed for 100% of your purified stagger, so keeping alive this Ox is much easier. The next one, Walk with the Ox, now also reduces flat out the cooldown of your Nuzao by 60 seconds, so now it's an easy and handy 2-minute cooldown. As well as, more importantly, you don't just get some basic 10% more damage on your stomp whenever you purify or whatever. Now instead you have chances to proc the summoning of your Nuzao by itself without actually having to use the cooldown. And the last one is also improved because now Nuzao is going to knock up enemies, which means interrupts, stops to casts of enemies in Mythic Plus. So the entire center line has been made much stronger. You were also given a couple more defensive talents in the toolkit. You were given Nuzao's Resolve to turn your healing spheres into a hot and increasing their healing by upwards of 80% based on your missing health. This can be very valuable if you want to play defensively, for the very simple reason that if we take some generic Mythic Plus keys being tested right now in the PTR, but even in live this will be the same, your healing usually will have either your passive to get you extra healing and then your healing spheres as your two highest forms of healing. So increasing this healing by upwards of 80% based on your missing health, and on top of this turning this into a hot over 10 seconds can reduce the amount of overhealing. So making the heal more effective, because instead of being a bigger chunk of healing all at once, it will be over 10 seconds, which will, generally speaking, lower the chances of you getting, higher overhealing. The other one is the replacement of Zen Meditation, which, yeah, sure, could be used to cheese some mechanics. Now you have a more standard passive. The effectiveness of your stagger can be increased by upwards of 20% based on your missing health. So, based on these changes, monks have essentially had to find how to ditch a few of the talents and also to further empower this line now that Nuzao is much more powerful. For example, the previously not taken talents around Weapons of Order, for example, Call to Arms. Weapons of Order calls Nuzao for 12 seconds. Now that Nuzao has empowered abilities like knockups on enemies, for example, this is much more worth to take. Now you have upwards of basically 4 different ways to have new Zaos out, because you can call new Zao yourself, you can proc new Zao with Walk with the Ox, you will proc new Zao when you activate Weapons of Order, and you can also proc new Zao when you trigger a bonus attack with Press the Advantage. That's 4 total ways to summon your new Zao. So the general idea is that back then, where you weren't taking these and you were taking Zen Meditation, you ditch these 4 previously taken talents down here in order to be able to get to your new Zao, as well as go back to taking now these 2 talents to power up your Weapons of Order. Now, one of the current debates right now when playing Brewmaster Monk is whether or not to still make use of Breath of Fire. This is because now you have even more defensive talents as a Brewmaster Monk. So technically speaking, when you get rid of Breath of Fire, you can go for some of these defensive talents, like for example the new Zao's Resolve to give you better healing over time with your spheres, the new Zen State to give you better value of your stagger over time, as well as go back to some of the talents you were already taking before, like High Tolerance, for example, or even any combination of these. Drop the Hot to put 2 points in High Tolerance, or get rid of 1 point in High Tolerance to reach Ox Stance, or get rid of Zen State to go back to put 1 point in New Zao's Resolve. Any combination of these 3 talents that you were previously spending in your Breath of Fire. Now, the Breath of Fire does come with an upside. Number 1, you do have the upside of the button presses for Breath of Fire for keeping you busy. Very simply because with Salsalabim Strength, you do reset Breath of Fire when you Keg Smash, and you do have 2 charges of Keg Smash on a reasonably low cooldown. So very often, whenever you Breath of Fire, you Keg Smash, and then you can Breath of Fire again, you can Keg Smash again, you can Breath of Fire again, and only after, a few GCDs, you can Keg Smash and Breath of Fire again. These are often, keeping you busy in terms of the GCDs you are pressing and also the damage you are doing. So obviously, if you were to get rid of all of this line and basically lose Breath of Fire, that's a button you are going to be missing during your rotation, and of course also damage. Now, the damage itself is not, let's just say, that huge, even now in the PTR when it comes to damage. Breath of Fire is responsible for very little of your damage, even if whether you're playing with just Breath of Fire or if you're actually dumping the points in Charred Passions, all of these combined, getting rid of this would make you lose 3% of your damage at best. So it's not that getting rid of this line is all about damage. It's more about the GCDs, the buttons you are pressing, and more importantly is the fact that Breath of Fire also puts a 5% damage reduction, or less damage taken by those enemies if they were affected by Keg Smash beforehand. So you threw the Keg Smash, they are debuffed, you put Breath of Fire, they're gonna be doing 5% less damage to you. And what's better is, if you do use your Blackout Kick before your Keg Smash and your Breath of Fire, now the damage reduction will be 10%. So that is practically a 10% DR, because you are playing with Blackout Combo, and the empowerment after using Blackout Kick when you use Breath of Fire is to not just do more damage, which we established is whatever, is to also increase the DR by 5%. So this button alone is 10% less damage. So, there is this conflict of saying, let's get rid of these 3 talents to pick some more defensive talents like this one and these 2. Sure, but this one was already giving you 10% DR, almost active at all times, even without using the reset, the cooldown reset. Breath of Fire by itself has a 15-second cooldown, and the debuff it puts on enemies lasts for 12. So for most of the duration of this debuff, you will have only a window of like 3 seconds where it won't be active. Now it expires, you wait a little bit, a couple of seconds, Breath of Fire will come off cooldown, and you will get the DR active on those enemies again, right? So there is this current, tinkering in the PTR, trying to figure out which of the combinations is best, whether to actually continue to play with the full line of Breath of Fire or to simply stick with just the naked Breath of Fire. For the very simple fact that still using the Blackout combo with Breath of Fire is still 10% DR. So you can still save 2 talent points by not taking these 2 and put them somewhere else. As we mentioned, it can be the healing and the better stagger. It can even be the 1 second CDR of your brews whenever you dodge. It can also be back to the already taken right now in season 2 high tolerance, both points to give you 4% better stagger. It could be only 1 point to get yourself into Ox stance. Any combination of 2 defensive talents. So any one of this, or this. Now, to make up for the missed GCDs you wouldn't be getting, because of course now you are not resetting your Breath of Fire anymore because you're not taking Salsalabin's strength. Many are actually going over to Rushing Jade, especially if they go for the full abandonment of Breath of Fire, right? If they're going for this style, then they still take, for example, high tolerance, they go back to taking the extra empowered hot, and now they take Rushing Jade. Because with decent amounts of haste, Rushing Jade will have a sub 5 second cooldown. So basically you are now replacing what you were often pressing, which was your resets of Breath of Fire because of Keg Smash. You are instead now replacing them with Rushing Jade as essentially as a substitute to your lack of your Breath of Fire button now, to have something to do with your buttons. It's not that this ability does anything, actually. The damage is whatever, and the synergy with the rest of your kit is 0. Doesn't actually give you more procs or anything until we got the reworked center line, because now there is the conviction of many players that because Rushing Jade keeps ticking for damage every time you use it, especially in AoE, of course, you're gonna be doing damage to all enemies every time it ticks, every time it ticks for damage like this. With these ticks, it's more instances of damage, which is more damaging abilities having a chance to invoke New Zao. So this is a much higher source of constant damage compared to Special Delivery, which very simply procs every time you drink from your brews. And you're gonna be doing ticking damage with your Rushing Jade at a much faster pace than the amount of times you drink from your brews. So you add more consistent damage, especially imagine in Mythic Plus fighting 10 enemies when you proc your New Zao because of the ticks of this Rushing Jade around you. That's the idea many players were going with right now in the PTR, and why you can often see it when checking out the results of the PTR testing, where you do see Rushing Jade and you do see as a result the stomp of your New Zao being generally higher up and proccing more than the stomps generated by someone who isn't running with the Rushing Jade instead. So that's the thought right now going on for Brewmaster Monk, which is, either way your damage is still solid as a tank overall. Even right now, actually, in current season 2 as a tank Brewmaster, your damage is middling. Long are the days where Brewmaster was this meme tank that was not really played, but they had like 15% more damage than any other tank. Right now, actually, the damage has been evened out for most tanks, except Guardian being sort of the odd one out, lower down in terms of damage. But most of the tanks, whether they are Prot Warrior, Blood DK, Vengeance, or Brewmaster especially, are all very close in terms of damage done. And still, dropping some damage for increased tankiness would be still the way to go, especially if you can drop it in a way where you can still, save yourself 1 talent point just to keep Breath of Fire, just to guarantee the 10% DR from Blackout combo, while still going and spending 2 other talent points in something to give you more tankiness, as opposed to these 2 talents, which are mostly just for more damage. The other point is about your tier sets. So currently in Season 2, right now, all monks, most monks, at least at high level, are going with Master of Harmony, not with Shadowpan. However, the tier set right now in the PTR at least is more favoring and favorable for Shadowpan than it is for Master of Harmony. Yes, they are both fine and viable. We are not in a one-sided situation like a few other tanks, like for example Blood DK playing Sun Lane, for example. But even without not being nearly as one-sided, Shadowpan has been empowered quite a bit by your tier set right now. The 2-piece set bonus with Flurry Strike dealing 30% more damage and then activating Weapons of Order, instantly giving you 10 stacks of Flurry Strikes that will trigger on your next attack. Of course, 10 stacks of Flurry Strikes, by the way, is the guaranteed buff you get. Wisdom of the Wall, one of these buffs you can get. And then the 4-piece Flurry Charge generation, more importantly, is increased by 100%, and Flurry Strikes trigger every 120 energy spent during Weapons of Order. This is relevant for one particular reason. This overflow of energy is relevant because of efficient training. Every 50 energy spent reduces the cooldown of Weapons of Order by 1 second, which translates to slightly above a 30-second cooldown. So it can bring Weapons of Order just below a 90-second cooldown, which of course gives further value to both of the talents you are taking, especially Call to Arms, which is going to guarantee you get a new Zao out for 12 seconds every time you Weapons of Order. So now you don't just have new Zao every 2 minutes, you also have new Zao every 90 seconds, because it's gonna be called by Weapons of Order. And that's also why you want to go now for these 2 talents, which you weren't going before, right now in Season 2. Now that you have a tier set as Shadowpan, which further empowers your window inside of Weapons of Order, these 2 talents gain exponential value in Season 3. And that's why it's also taking over the current Master of Harmony tier set, which is a very passive, very boring, very in the background kind of tier set, which doesn't really do anything. It just gives you more passive damage. You just cast Tiger Palm over time and it will do that damage from the tier set over time without really changing anything in the way you play, whereas the Shadowpan tier set does empower one of your major cooldowns, your major cooldown in Weapons of Order. This is most of the reasons which has given Brewmaster Monk a lot of a lot of good positive vibes for Season 3, and also of course not just Brewmaster Monks but tanks in general, thinking about looking forward to one of the possible main tanks slash main picks for next season. Even non-Brewmaster players obviously willing to play Brewmaster if it becomes meta. It has been looking very good in the PTR. All of these changes towards being more tanky and more defensives have been seen very positively right now for Brewmaster. Most of these were very good. They empower things you already wanted to have powerful, like Weapons of Order, both the extra talents now synergizing even better thanks to your new empowered new Zao line, and now also your tier set, as well as the current tinkering around the talents, depending on the way it will end up going, if it will stay with special delivery or move over to rushing Jade Wind, if it will stay abandoning completely Breath of Fire, or only partially abandoning Breath of Fire, or not abandoning Breath of Fire at all. This will likely be, depending on the key level, the higher it will go, if it will be necessary for Brewmaster to go that much more defensively to be able to stay alive, for example, or if perhaps maybe we will be in a season where tank damage will be more relevant, so Brewmasters will try to squeeze more damage from their talents rather than going more defensively. But right now, overall, it has been the more looked after of the tanks for Season 3, besides pretty much matching the already popular tank in Season 2, which is Vengeance Demon Hunter. So we will continue to monitor the developments of this tank in the next changes of the PTR, whether they will be further buffs or nerfs or just changes to the spec. But for today, this is what we have for the highlights of what's going down in the PTR for next season. So for today, we can now stop here and leave each other by starting the goodbyes, of course, by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting Competi for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yep, I need to eat, and for some reason, it's one of the days where I have the craving of meat, red meat.